In 1985, American supermarket shelves carried roughly 40,000 packaged food products, and federal regulators considered nearly all of them perfectly safe. 4 decades later, the FDA has pulled, restricted, or outright outlawed dozens of those everyday grocery items. The bright sodas, the lunchbox snacks, the diet candies that mothers handed to children without a second thought. Number 17 on this list killed teenagers who drank too many cans in a single night. Number 11 was sprayed on apples until the EPA discovered it caused tumors in lab rats. Number 3 on this list was banned across Europe for a decade before America finally caught up. The 1980s grocery aisle looked harmless, but the science was already quietly turning against it. So hit subscribe and pull up a chair, because here are 25 foods from the 1980s that are now banned in America. Number 25, Mr. Pibb Original Formula. Coca-Cola rolled this out in 1972 as a direct shot at Dr. Pepper, and by the late 1970s it was on every American supermarket shelf in those tall, slim cans with the red and yellow label. The original recipe leaned heavy on a particular blend of caffeine and a synthetic clove cherry flavoring that gave it a sharper bite than its rival. Kids loved it because it tasted like a soda that had been dared to be weirder. Then in 2001, Coca-Cola quietly pulled the original and replaced it with Pibb Extra, a reformulated version with less bite, different sweeteners, and a tamer flavor profile. The original recipe was gone. The bottlers stopped producing it. You can still find Pibb Extra in some southern fountain machines, but the 1980s Mr. Pibb your father pulled from the cooler on a Saturday afternoon does not exist anymore. The formula is locked away in a Coca-Cola archive and has not been sold for nearly 25 years. Number 24, Pop Rocks Original Recipe. General Foods released these candies in 1975, and by the early 1980s, every kid in America had a pack in their lunchbox. The original recipe used a pressurized carbon dioxide process that made the crystals snap and pop louder than the version sold today. Then came the rumor. Newspapers across the country printed warnings that swallowing Pop Rocks with soda would cause your stomach to explode. The story was tied to Mikey from the Life cereal commercials, who supposedly died from the combination. None of it was true. But the panic was real enough that General Foods pulled the product from many regions by 1983 and rewrote the formula completely. The crystals you can buy today are softer, quieter, and use a different gas blend. The thunderous 1980s version that made you flinch on the first bite was discontinued 40 years ago. Number 23, Squirt's Original Citrus Formula. Squirt had been around since 1938, but the 1980s version on grocery shelves contained brominated vegetable oil as a citrus flavor stabilizer. BVO was what kept the grapefruit oils from separating and floating to the top of the bottle. It also happened to be a chemical cousin of flame retardants. Studies from the 1970s onward had flagged it as a potential thyroid disruptor, and by the late 1980s, most American consumers had never even heard of it. Squirt's parent company kept the BVO in for decades. Then, in July 2024, the FDA officially revoked the regulation that allowed BVO in any food product sold on American shelves. Manufacturers were given 1 year to reformulate, relabel, and clear out remaining inventory. The exact citrus formula that defined Squirt for almost 50 years is now illegal to produce. The new version uses a different stabilizer and tastes slightly cleaner, which longtime drinkers say is not a compliment. Number 22, Sassafras Root Beer. Real root beer was supposed to taste like the woods. That earthy bark flavor came from sassafras oil, which gave traditional brewed root beer its signature depth. The problem was saffrole, the active compound that made up about 80% of that oil. The FDA had banned saffrole in commercial foods back in 1960 after rat studies linked it to liver tumors, but small craft brewers and home recipes kept using it well into the 1980s. Health food cookbooks from that decade still printed sassafras tea recipes. Then, in the 1970s, the agency went further and specifically banned sassafras bark itself for commercial sale. By the late 1980s, No commercial root beer on an American shelf contained real sassafras anymore. Every bottle of A and W, Mug, and IBC sitting in your refrigerator uses synthetic saffron-free flavoring designed to mimic what your grandfather drank. The original taste is gone, and federal law makes sure it stays gone. Number 21. Trans fat margarine sticks. Every American kitchen in the 1980s had a stick of margarine sitting next to the butter dish. Parquet, Blue Bonnet, Imperial. They were cheaper than butter, spread easier on cold toast, and the commercials told mothers they were the heart-healthy choice. They were the opposite. Partially hydrogenated vegetable oil, the backbone of every cheap margarine, was the largest source of artificial trans fat in the American diet. Researchers later estimated it caused up to 250,000 heart attacks and around 50,000 deaths every year in this country. The FDA officially banned partially hydrogenated oils in food in June 2018. The yellow brick of 1980s margarine your aunt fried eggs in is now legally extinct. Modern spreads use entirely different oil blends. Number 20. Hostess pudding pies. The Hostess pudding pie sat in every gas station and corner store in America during the 1980s, wrapped in that white cellophane with the blue lettering. Vanilla, chocolate, and butterscotch flavors stuffed into a glazed pie crust, a staple of the after-school snack drawer. They were also a chemistry experiment of partially hydrogenated soybean oil, artificial colors, and a shelf-stable pudding filling that could survive a month in a delivery truck. When Hostess collapsed for the first time in 2012, the pudding pie did not come back when production resumed. The new owners quietly discontinued it. The recipe used too many ingredients that were already being phased out under updated FDA rules, and the cost of reformulating it to meet modern oil standards killed the math. You cannot buy a Hostess pudding pie in 2026. The closest competitor, Little Debbie, makes a version. But the original Hostess pudding center with that distinct vanilla pull is locked in a corporate file cabinet and has not been on a shelf for over a decade. Number 19. Reese's Bites. Hershey launched these in 2002, but they were essentially the bite-sized fulfillment of a 1980s vending machine dream that Reese's had been chasing for years. Tiny chocolate peanut butter spheres in a resealable bag marketed as the perfect lunchbox candy. Within a year, school nurses and parents started calling Hershey. The bites were exactly the size and shape that lodge in a child's airway. Reports of choking incidents climbed fast. Hershey pulled Reese's Bites from the entire American market in 2003. They have never come back. The shape was the problem, and the company quietly admitted it. What survived was the larger Reese's Pieces and Mini Cups, which are wider, flatter, and harder to inhale. The original bites that lined the candy aisle for one brief year are gone from American shelves, and Hershey has shown no interest in reviving them. A whole product killed by its own geometry, and you will not find a single legitimate bag in a store today. Number 18. Olean Wow Chips. Frito-Lay launched these in 1998 as the answer to every dieter's prayer. 0 grams of fat, half the calories of regular chips. The magic was Olean, the brand name for Olestra, a synthetic fat molecule that Procter & Gamble had spent nearly $300 million developing over 25 years. The molecule was so large the human body could not absorb it. It passed straight through. Unfortunately, it took everything else along for the ride. Customers reported severe abdominal cramping, sudden diarrhea, and a side effect the FDA forced onto every bag in big, bold letters. The warning label became a national punchline. Late-night hosts mocked it. Frito-Lay still managed to sell $347 million of Wow chips in 1998 alone. Then sales collapsed. By 2016, Lay's had quietly stripped Olean out of every chip they made. Olestra remains technically FDA approved on American shelves, but it is banned in Canada and across the European Union. The original Wow chips no longer exist. The formulation is dead. Number 17. Jolt Cola. This is the one the intro promised. Jolt hit American shelves in 1985 with a slogan that today reads like a dare. All the sugar and twice the caffeine. A 12-ounce can carried 70 milligrams of caffeine, which pushed right up against the FDA's legal ceiling for soft drinks. College students drank it through finals week. Programmers drank it through overnight coding marathons. And teenagers drank it like soda. By the late 1980s, emergency rooms across the country were reporting cases of severe caffeine intoxication in adolescents who had downed 4 or 5 cans in a single night, and a handful of those cases were linked to dangerous cardiac arrhythmias. Schools banned Jolt. Parents banned Jolt. The original formula was eventually pulled when the company filed for bankruptcy in 2009. A 2025 relaunch exists, but it is a different product with different labeling and stricter caffeine rules. Number 16. Hostess Choco Bliss. The Choco Bliss was a small chocolate cream-filled cake that Hostess introduced in 1979 and pushed hard through the 1980s. 2 soft chocolate layers with a fudgy cream center glazed on top, wrapped in cellophane. It was Hostess's answer to Suzy Q's, only richer and shaped like a domed pillow. School lunch counters carried them. Vending machines carried them. The 1985 commercials called it the snack cake that was almost too good. Then, in 1999, Hostess discontinued the Choco Bliss without warning. Sales had dipped behind Twinkies and Ding Dongs, and the partially hydrogenated oil content combined with the high fructose corn syrup made it expensive to reformulate for the changing regulatory landscape. The recipe never returned. Multiple online petitions over the past 2 decades have begged Hostess to bring it back. The company has stayed silent. The Choco Bliss your older brother stole from your lunchbox in 1986 has been gone from American shelves for over 25 years, and nothing on the modern Hostess lineup tastes quite like it. Number 15. Whip and Chill Dessert Mix. General Foods sold this powdered dessert mix from the 1960s through the late 1980s as the easiest dessert on the planet. Pour the packet into cold milk, beat for a minute, chill for an hour, and you had a light chocolate or vanilla mousse-style dessert. Suburban mothers loved it. Church potlucks were built around it. The recipe was a chemistry set of partially hydrogenated coconut oil, artificial flavors, sodium caseinate, and food dyes that included the very red number 3 we are about to talk about. By the early 1990s, Whip and Chill was off most American shelves. General Foods folded into Kraft, and Kraft did not see a future for a product whose entire identity was built on hydrogenated tropical oil and synthetic dyes. The mix simply disappeared. There is no current production. There is no online stockpile. The empty cardboard boxes from 1984 are now traded as nostalgia memorabilia on auction sites, which is the saddest possible footnote for a dessert that once defined Tuesday night convenience. Number 14. Red Dye Number 3. This one earned its own slot on the list because of how long it took to dye. Red 3, formerly known as erythrocene, was the bright pink-red color that defined a generation of American childhood snacks. Maraschino cherries, strawberry yogurt, pink Hostess snowballs, candy corn, conversation hearts on Valentine's Day, pink-colored pills and cough syrups. If you grew up in the 1980s, you ate this dye almost every week without knowing it. The scientific case against Red 3 started building in 1983. A team of researchers at the FDA's own toxicology lab ran a 2-year feeding study on male rats and found that high doses of Red 3 caused thyroid tumors. The data was strong enough that the FDA banned Red 3 in cosmetics in 1990. But under heavy industry pressure, the agency left it legal in food and ingested medications. So for 35 more years, every box of strawberry Pop-Tarts, every jar of pickled cherries, every pink Peep, every pink candy in the bulk bin kept using the same chemical the agency had already banned from your face. Then the math finally caught up. By 2024, more than 3,500 American food products still contained Red 3. The state of California banned it in food in October 2023. The pressure forced the federal hand, and on January 15, 2025, the FDA finally revoked authorization for Red 3 in all food and ingested drugs. Manufacturers have until January 2027 to clear it out completely. The dye that colored your school lunch tray for 4 decades is officially on the way out, and the math behind why is staggering. 3,500 products, one chemical, 35 years of foot dragging between the cosmetic ban and the food ban. That gap is the story of the 1980s grocery aisle in a single statistic. Number 13, BVO, brominated vegetable oil. If red 3 was the color of the 1980s aisle, BVO was the texture. Brominated vegetable oil kept the citrus flavors in your Mountain Dew, your Sundrop, your Fresca, and your generic brand orange soda from separating and floating to the top of the bottle. It worked beautifully. It also happened to be a vegetable oil modified with bromine, a chemical cousin of certain flame retardants that the human body slowly accumulated in fat tissue. Studies dating back to the 1970s flagged it as a thyroid disruptor. Europe banned it. Japan banned it. The FDA finally followed in July 2024, revoking the regulation that allowed BVO in any American food product. The 1980s soda you remember is now legally extinct. Number 12, EDB, ethylene dibromide grain fumigant. Before EDB became a scandal, it was the workhorse of American grain storage. From 1948 onward, more than 20 million pounds of ethylene dibromide were sprayed every year into the wheat, corn, and oat silos that fed the country, where it killed weevils and beetles dead on contact. The problem was that residues stayed in the grain. They stayed in the flour. They stayed in your cake mixes, your cereals, your breakfast biscuits, and your boxed cornbread. Laboratory tests through the late 1970s flagged EDB as a potent carcinogen and mutagen, and by 1983 the chemical was turning up in groundwater across Florida, Georgia, and California. The EPA issued an emergency suspension in late 1983 and a full ban on grain fumigation in February 1984. Hundreds of cake mixes and cereal boxes were pulled overnight. The 1980s pantry of partially contaminated bread mix and instant muffin powder was federally erased inside one news cycle. Number 11, Alar on apples. This is the one the intro promised. Alar, the trade name for the growth regulator dimenazide, was sprayed across American apple orchards from 1968 onward to keep fruit from dropping before it ripened. Red Delicious, McIntosh, and Stamen apples sold in every American grocery store carried Alar residues straight through the 1980s, and the breakdown product UDMH turned up in apple juice, applesauce, and baby food. Then, on February 26, 1989, CBS aired a 60-minute segment with Ed Bradley standing in front of a skull and crossbones apple, telling 40 million viewers that EPA scientists had classified Alar as a probable human carcinogen after rat studies showed clear tumors. School districts pulled apples from cafeterias within 48 hours. National apple sales dropped 60% that spring. Growers lost over $100 million. Uniroyal, the manufacturer, voluntarily pulled Alar from the American market by June 1989, and the EPA formally banned it later that year. Every apple in your child's lunchbox before 1989 had been sprayed with a chemical the EPA already considered unsafe. Number 10, DES, treated beef. Diethylstilbestrol was the synthetic estrogen that built the American supermarket beef counter. The FDA approved it for oral use in cattle in 1954 and as an ear implant in 1956, and by the late 1970s, an estimated 80 to 95% of all American beef cattle were being dosed with DES to make them grow faster on less feed. Every ribeye, every hamburger patty, every slice of Sunday roast served in a 1970s American kitchen carried trace DES residues. Then the link to clear cell vaginal cancer in the daughters of women who had taken DES during pregnancy became impossible to ignore. The FDA tried to ban DES in cattle in 1972 and again in 1973. Both struck down on procedural grounds in court. The final ban came in 1979, just before the 1980s grocery decade began. By the time you were buying ground chuck for Hamburger Helper in 1985, the beef in the styrofoam tray was DES-free for the first time in 25 years. Number 9. Tab Cola Original. The pink can was everywhere in the 1980s. Tab was Coca-Cola's first diet soda, launched in 1963, and for almost 20 years it ruled the office refrigerator, the country club lounge, and the airline beverage cart. The original formula was sweetened with a blend of cyclamate and saccharin, then switched entirely to saccharin in 1969 after cyclamate was banned. Through the late 1970s and into the 1980s, every can of Tab carried the federally mandated warning that saccharin had caused cancer in laboratory animals. Drinkers ignored it. Then in May 1984, Coca-Cola added NutraSweet to the recipe, and loyal Tab drinkers said the flavor was never the same again. Sales declined for 36 straight years. In October 2020, Coca-Cola officially discontinued Tab as part of a pandemic-era brand cull. The original 1980s pink can with the saccharin warning label is gone for good. Number 8. Cyclamate-containing imports. The artificial sweetener cyclamate was banned by the FDA in October 1969 after a study tied it to bladder tumors in rats. Every American diet soda, every sugar-free candy, every no-cal product reformulated overnight. But cyclamate stayed legal in Canada, the United Kingdom, and large parts of Europe. Throughout the 1980s, specialty grocery stores and ethnic markets in American cities quietly stocked imported British marmalades, German diet chocolates, and Mexican sugar-free gum that still contained cyclamate. Customs officers periodically seized shipments, but the trickle never fully stopped. By the late 1980s, the FDA was sending warning letters to importers and pulling specific products from shelves on a case-by-case basis. The 1980s grocery aisle in any major American city carried a small shadow inventory of cyclamate-sweetened imports that were technically illegal the entire time they sat next to the cash register. Number 7. Coumarin vanilla imports. Real Mexican vanilla extract was a 1980s souvenir staple. Tourists came home from Cancun, Cozumel, and Puerto Vallarta with cheap glass bottles of vanilla labeled Vanilla Pura, and home bakers across the United States poured it into cookies, cakes, and custards thinking they had scored a deal. Most of those bottles did not contain real vanilla bean extract. They were diluted with coumarin, a fragrant compound extracted from tonka beans that smells almost identical to vanilla but costs a fraction of the real thing. The FDA had banned coumarin as a food additive way back in 1954 because it caused liver damage in rats and was suspected of acting as a blood thinner in humans. American grocery shelves were supposed to be coumarin-free. But the souvenir bottles slipped through customs by the thousands every summer through the 1980s, and by 1985, the FDA was issuing public advisories warning travelers not to bring back Mexican vanilla. The vanilla extract sitting in your mother's spice cabinet in 1987 might have been federally illegal the entire time it flavored your birthday cake. Number 6. Lead-soldered food cans. Pull a can of tuna, peaches, or condensed soup off any American grocery shelf in 1980, and the side seam was sealed with a thin bead of lead tin solder. The seal was cheap, fast, and held a vacuum reliably. It also leached lead into the food, especially when the contents were acidic, like tomato sauce, fruit cocktail, or pineapple chunks. By the early 1980s, FDA testing found that lead-soldered cans were a major dietary source of lead exposure for American children, contributing somewhere between 15 and 40% of average daily intake. The FDA began pressuring canners to switch to welded steel seams in 1979, and most major American manufacturers had moved over by 1991. The full federal ban on lead-soldered food cans took effect in June 1995. Every Campbell's soup, every Del Monte fruit cup, every Bumblebee tuna you ate before the late 1980s came out of a can sealed with a metal the agency now classifies as having no safe level of exposure for children. Number 5. New Coke. On April 23, 1985, Coca-Cola did the unthinkable. They announced they were replacing the 99-year-old original formula with a sweeter, smoother recipe designed to beat Pepsi in blind taste tests. The new can hit shelves nationwide within weeks. The backlash was historic. Coca-Cola's customer hotline received over 400,000 angry calls and letters. People hoarded the old recipe. Bottles of pre-changed Coke sold on the secondary market for 3 times their original price. 79 days later, on July 11, 1985, the company surrendered and brought back the original formula under the name Coca-Cola Classic. New Coke was quietly relegated to a side product, renamed Coke 2 in 1992, and finally pulled from American shelves entirely in July 2002. The original recipe that defined the summer of 1985 has not been sold in any American store for over 2 decades, and Coca-Cola has shown no interest in bringing it back. Number 4. Sweet and Low Original Saccharine. The pink paper packet was on every diner table, every coffee counter, every airline tray in 1980s America. Sweet and Low was pure saccharin, the same artificial sweetener that powered Tab Cola, and from 1977 onward, every box and packet carried the federally mandated warning that saccharin caused cancer in rats. Congress had passed the Saccharine Study and Labeling Act in 1977, forcing the warning onto every product after the FDA tried to ban saccharin outright. The label remained for 23 years. Then, in 2000, Congress repealed the warning requirement after the National Toxicology Program concluded saccharin was not a human carcinogen at typical exposure levels. The pink packets you tore open at the IHOP in 1986 looked nearly identical to the ones sold today, but the warning label is gone. The version sold in 2026 also blends in dextrose and a different saccharin manufacturing process, and the original pure saccharin formula your grandmother stirred into her coffee has been quietly reformulated out of existence. Number 3. Potassium bromate bread. This is the one the intro promised. Potassium bromate was the dough conditioner that gave 1980s American bread its lofty rise, fine crumb, and pillowy texture. Wonder Bread used it. Sunbeam used it. Every bag of supermarket sandwich bread, every dinner roll, every hamburger bun coming out of a major American bakery in the 1980s was almost certainly bromated. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classified potassium bromate as a possible human carcinogen after studies linked it to thyroid and kidney tumors in rats. The European Union banned it in 1990. The United Kingdom followed the same year. Canada banned it in 1994. 40 countries eventually banned it. The FDA has not formally reviewed potassium bromate since 1973. Then California finally acted, signing AB 418 in October 2023 to ban potassium bromate from any food sold in the state effective January 2027. The bread on your family table in 1985 contained a chemical that Europe outlawed for cancer risk 5 years later, and federal regulators are still 35 years behind. Number 2. Hydrox Sunshine Biscuits Original. The original American sandwich cookie was Hydrox, not Oreo. Sunshine Biscuits launched Hydrox in 1908, 4 years before Nabisco copied the design and called it Oreo. Throughout the 1980s, Hydrox was the slightly crunchier, less sweet alternative that loyalists swore tasted cleaner than its more famous rival. The shortening was different. The cocoa blend was different. The cream filling held its shape better when dunked in milk. Keebler bought Sunshine Biscuits in 1996, and in 1999, Keebler quietly retired the Hydrox name and replaced the recipe with a softer, sweeter knockoff called Droxy's. Droxy's was discontinued in 2003. The original Sunshine Biscuits formula that defined the 1980s lunchbox was gone. Leaf Brands brought the Hydrox name back in 2015 with a new recipe, but longtime fans say the modern version is not the same cookie. The exact 1980s Hydrox is locked in an archive recipe book and has not been baked commercially for over 25 years. Number 1. Aldicarb Watermelons. On July 4, 1985, more than 1,000 Americans across California, Oregon, Washington, and parts of Canada sat down to picnic dinners and started vomiting within an hour. The cause was watermelons sprayed illegally with Aldicarb, a systemic pesticide so toxic that 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight is enough to kill an adult. California growers had used it on watermelons without authorization. The chemical migrated into the fruit, and the resulting outbreak became the largest foodborne pesticide poisoning ever recorded in North America. 1,376 confirmed cases in California alone, 483 more across 10 other jurisdictions, 17 hospitalizations. State officials ordered grocers to pull and destroy 10 million watermelons from coast to coast in the largest produce recall the country had ever seen. The 1985 4th of July picnic became a national health emergency, and aldicarb was eventually pulled from American food crops entirely by the EPA, with the final phase-out completed in 2018. Pick the one that hit you hardest. Was it the pink tab can on your mother's counter, the Hydrox in your lunchbox, or the watermelon nobody ate on the 4th of July in 1985? These were not exotic products. They were the bread on the table, the soda in the cooler, the cookies in the pantry, the apples in the bowl. The science was turning against most of them. Now, I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. This is a look back at what regulators decided about the food we grew up on. Tell me in the comments which one you remember most and which one you still cannot believe was on the shelf. The grocery aisle never tells you what it used to be.